Have you ever noticed how some doors only seem open to those who are well-dressed or appear to have money in their pockets? How many times have you been judged for your appearance or for the simple way you speak or dress? Now, imagine a humble young man, full of dreams, being mocked and denied entry into a luxury store just because he didn't look like a real customer. Sounds unfair, right? But what if, days later, that same young man returned with his millionaire father, not just to make a big purchase, but to buy the entire place and rewrite the company's story? Today, I want to share one of the most surprising stories you've ever heard about justice, prejudice, and character. I'm going to show you why judging by appearance isn't just wrong, it's a terrible business decision. And I'll prove that humility is not a sign of weakness, but the most powerful fuel to turn any humiliation into triumph. Believe me, after hearing this story, you'll never look at people the same way again. Ready to find out how it all unfolded? Then stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will make you reflect, smile, and maybe even change the way you treat people you meet along the way. Most great stories begin quietly, almost invisibly. That's how it started for Gabriel, who walked into that luxury car dealership with hope in his eyes, wearing simple clothes and carrying a heart full of dreams. But all it took was a dismissive glance, a stifled laugh behind the counter. And he understood. They didn't see him as a customer, but as someone out of place. That, my friend, is a type of humiliation that doesn't need words to hurt. It's subtle, but it cuts like an arrow to the pride. And who hasn't felt the judging gaze at some point in life? The saddest part is that many people go through this daily without realizing they're experiencing a kind of emotional violence disguised as indifference. Gabriel was ignored because of his appearance, but how many stories of exclusion do we see even inside companies, schools, and churches? If you've ever walked into a place and felt unwelcome, know this: it wasn't your imagination. Sometimes, the door is open, but the hearts inside are closed, and that changes everything. Now think with me. How many opportunities are lost because someone judged too soon, without even looking into your eyes? If Gabriel had given up right then and there, like so many do, his story would have ended as just another, among millions, a dreamer rejected before even showing who he was. But he chose to pocket the pain and turn humiliation into fuel. And the most incredible part was what happened just 7 days later. When the manager showed up, Gabriel still had a flicker of hope. Maybe now he'd be heard. Maybe the so-called premium service would finally be offered. But what he got instead was a rehearsed speech, the kind that sounds polite on the surface, but hides poison between the lines. "You don't fit the profile of our clientele," said Mr. Roberto, as if handing down a verdict. Funny how some forms of prejudice come wrapped in business etiquette, as if the issue is with the customer, not the discriminatory system. This kind of prejudice is the most dangerous, because it hides behind policies, processes, and corporate jargon. Ever heard "we don't have openings at the moment" when a job applicant doesn't match a visual standard? Or "our products are very exclusive" when a customer is wearing a backpack? Gabriel was a victim of this invisible layer of rejection, the same one that stops so many talented people from moving forward. It's like playing a game where the referee has already decided the score before the kickoff. And worst of all, people think that's normal. But Gabriel's story was far from over. That humiliation, that feeling of being small in a place where no one sees you, left a mark. And while the manager thought he'd dismissed just another curious onlooker, Gabriel was already mentally writing the next chapter. No one in that dealership saw coming, because when life slams a door in arrogance, sometimes it opens another with force. And that force often comes with powerful names. 7 days later, the dealership looked the same: elitist atmosphere, selective stares, plastic smiles. But this time, it wasn't just Gabriel walking in. It was Gabriel alongside Enrique Vidal, a name that would make any executive sit up straighter. Enrique wasn't just a businessman. He was a legend in the automotive industry. What happened next felt like a movie. Employees swallowing hard, the manager hiding his panic. Suddenly, the invisible boy was at the center of everyone's attention. Funny how the presence of someone important changes the whole game, isn't it? The same boy who was ignored a week earlier was now causing a stir just by walking in with the right person. It says a lot about how society measures value, not by character, but by last names, bank accounts, and associations. What no one there knew was that Gabriel didn't need to prove anything. His story was already becoming a living lesson. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes in you, and in some cases, one who has the capital to turn the tables. But Enrique wasn't there just to be a supporting character in his son's story. He had a plan. And that plan would change, not just Gabriel's trajectory, but the fate of that dealership, and everyone in it. Because when a man with power and principles decides to act, even the walls pay attention. And the next plot twist? Well, it was simply devastating. Enrique didn't ask for explanations. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked around, saw the faces that had treated his son like an intruder a week before, and said firmly, "I want to buy this dealership, today." The words hit like lightning. Within hours, contracts were signed, seals stamped, and the dealership's history was changed forever. That purchase wasn't just a deal, it was a clear message. Underestimating people can be very costly. While the staff scrambled to understand what was happening, Gabriel stood in silence, not out of revenge, but for justice. It was as if each signature from his father tore down the old culture and made room for a new beginning. Enrique knew exactly what he was doing. Real investors don't buy companies just for profit. They buy because they see purpose. And purpose, as he well knew, starts with respect. That was the first step in transforming a personal wound into a collective story of change. Imagine that, in less than 7 days, the boy who was dismissed became the heir to the business. But that wasn't the end of the lesson. The purchase was just the stage. The real show came next, when justice was served with the precision of someone who knows exactly where to cut. Because sometimes, before you plant something new, you have to clear the poisoned soil. Enrique didn't hesitate. He gathered all employees and, without sugarcoating, announced that those responsible for humiliating his son were fired. One by one. No long speeches, no corporate theatrics. Straight to the point, because some actions need clear consequences. You see, every story of transformation requires a cut. And when a place's culture is rotten, you don't repaint the walls, you replace the roots. A lot of people saw this as revenge. But looking deeper, it's easy to see. It was a masterclass in leadership. Enrique didn't want an environment where arrogance was mistaken for excellence. He knew that to build something lasting, he had to start with the basics: respect. That chain of dismissals wasn't about punishment, it was about accountability. And that lesson, my friend, applies everywhere, from the smallest business to the biggest empire. Where there are people, there's culture. And where there's culture, there's a choice. What kind of story are you building in your workplace? And the most powerful part comes afterward. Because when you clear out those who judge, oppress, or belittle others, you make room for those who dream, serve, and transform. Enrique didn't just want to clean house. He wanted to build something new, something that didn't just make sense on a spreadsheet, but touched hearts. And the first seed would be planted right there, in front of everyone. With every eye on him, and an almost sacred silence in the room, Enrique stepped onto a small makeshift platform. There was no arrogance in his voice, only weight, experience, and the rare kind of wisdom that only those who've fallen and risen can carry. Respect isn't a favor, it's a foundation, he said. And in that moment, even those who had never reflected on it felt the words hit like a punch to the chest. The dealership story was being rewritten, not with ink, but with truth. Enrique spoke about humility as someone who had lived its highs and lows. He shared how he started out washing cars as a young man, and how it was being treated with dignity. Even at the bottom, that taught him what true greatness was. He said, if success makes you look down on others, then you've failed. Phrases like that aren't common in business meetings, but they're necessary. They're like keys that unlock awareness. Every story of greatness begins with empathy, and he knew that by heart. At the end of the speech, what you saw wasn't just thoughtful employees. These were people genuinely moved, perhaps for the first time, by a leadership style that doesn't shout, but transforms. Enrique didn't want admiration, he wanted change. And right there, he planted the kind of value that doesn't fit on a resume, but has the power to move mountains. And the next decision he made would be the turning point for this new era, placing in his son's hands the mission to lead the dealership's rebirth. Gabriel's appointment as director wasn't just symbolic. It was an act of faith in the future, a reminder that even the most unlikely stories can flourish when there's space to grow. On his first day as a leader, Gabriel didn't wear an expensive suit or speak in fancy words. He walked in wearing the same simple clothes as before, looked his team in the eyes and said, "Here, everyone will be treated like a human being." And that alone was enough to transform the store's entire atmosphere. He knew where to touch, because he knew the pain of being ignored. He overhauled the entire customer service system, introducing training based on active listening, empathy, and inclusion. This wasn't motivational speech talk, it was action. Instead of demanding artificial posture, he encouraged authenticity. Instead of cold goals, he promoted purpose. And that, my friend, changes everything. Because when culture changes, energy changes. And when energy changes, new stories are born with light in the eyes and truth in the heart. And the best part, he began hiring young people from humble backgrounds, many with resumes that would have been tossed aside at first glance. Gabriel wanted to offer what he never received, a real opportunity. And with every new face joining the team, he felt like he was healing a wound, not just his own, but that of many others. Among those new hires, though, there was someone special, a woman who carried not only experience in her story, but scars of rejection that mirrored his own. Among the new faces on the team was Julia, an experienced saleswoman, but constantly overlooked because she didn't meet the visual standard many places demanded. She didn't wear expensive heels or designer makeup. She wore authenticity. And in many places, that still isn't enough. Gabriel saw her, listened to her story, and instantly understood. She was the kind of professional who transforms an environment, not because of how she looks, but because of the soul she puts into what she does. And finally, she was given the chance the world had long denied her. Under the new leadership, Julia didn't just fill a role, she shined. Within a few months she was promoted, became a reference in customer service, and started training new sellers based on something simple. Treat the client how you'd like to be treated. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? But very few actually do it. The dealership began receiving praise. Clients came back not just for the cars, but for the experience. Because where there is respect, real relationships are born. And where real relationships are born, stories are created that last forever. And Julia wasn't alone. Many others who had once been invisible began to stand out. People who sold with heart, welcomed with a glance, and solved problems with empathy. It was as if the dealership had gained a new soul. And all of it was thanks to a simple but profound change, replacing appearance with essence. But the most beautiful part was still to come, when Gabriel and Enrique decided to show that justice, when done with purpose, transforms far more than it punishes. A lot of people, after experiencing humiliation, dream of revenge. But Enrique and Gabriel chose something much more powerful, purpose-driven justice. They didn't just want to fire people, they wanted to transform, and they did it through concrete actions. They created inclusion programs, opened doors for overlooked talent, and built a culture where everyone could feel like they belonged. The dealership stopped being about cars. It became a symbol of new beginnings. Because in the end, what moves the world isn't anger, it's vision. Just imagine a luxury car dealership becoming a reference for inclusion, respect, and human development. Sounds unlikely, right? But that's exactly what happened. Customers began noticing the difference in the service, the atmosphere, the conversations. The brand stopped selling status and started selling values. And believe it or not, that sells more than any powerful machine. The secret: treat people like people. And each employee, each customer, became part of that new story. And the most incredible thing is that this transformative justice not only redeemed Gabriel's past, it paved the way for the future of many others. The cycle of pain was broken, and in its place, a cycle of opportunity began. A living lesson that power, when used wisely, can become a tool for healing. But the final touch of this journey was yet to come. It was time to understand, once and for all, where true wealth lies. At the end of it all, Gabriel stood alone for a moment, observing every corner of that dealership that now breathed a new spirit. The structure was the same, but the soul was different. There were no more looks of contempt, no more forced smiles. There was humanity. He looked at the showroom window, saw his reflection, and remembered what his father always used to say: "What we wear can change, but who we are, that's worth gold." That phrase had never made more sense. And right there, one story ended, but a mission was born. True wealth isn't in the cars on display, nor in a bank balance. It's in how you treat someone who has nothing to offer you. It's in never forgetting where you came from, even after reaching the top. Gabriel understood this better than most. He was still the same young man, but now, he carried the responsibility of inspiring new stories, of opening paths for those on the margins, of proving that character is the most valuable asset a person can have. And maybe that's the most precious legacy of this whole journey: the ability to turn pain into purpose, rejection into opportunity, and prejudice into learning. Because when someone chooses to act from the heart, no amount of status can resist, and no appearance can block the way. And you, what have you been building with your choices? What kind of story do you want to leave behind in the world? The answer to that can start today, with a simple change in how you see others. So tell me, how many times have you failed to recognize someone's true value just because they didn't look important? How many incredible stories may have passed you by simply because you looked but didn't really see? Gabriel's journey shows us that behind every simple appearance, there might be a strength capable of changing destinies, and that the real luxury is treating everyone with respect, regardless of status, clothing, or last name. Now I ask you, what are you going to do with everything you've learned here today? Will you keep judging by the cover, or will you choose to see people for who they really are? Will you be just one more in the crowd, or will you write a new story based on empathy, courage, and purpose? If this story touched you in any way, drop a comment below. Asterisk, what was the moment that moved you the most? I'll read every comment carefully. And of course, if you want to keep learning through powerful stories like this one, stories that inspire, challenge, and teach, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, every week, you'll find reflections that might change the way you see the world, and maybe even change your life.